Welcome to the Essential Self-Care Podcast, a show for those of us who are, let's face it, too busy for self-care. Each week, we bring you real-life stories and expert insights to help you create a kinder, more compassionate relationship with yourself. I'm your host, Dr. Sheetal Ajmani, a physician with over 2 decades of experience blending Eastern and Western well-being practices. As the founder of Radiant Living Institute, I'm here to help you reconnect with your own inner radiance. Remember, small changes make a large impact, and it all starts here. Please note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult your own healthcare provider about your specific situation. Now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. I am excited to welcome back to the show Charese Josie. Charese and I met at the closing summit of the Women Who Lead program, where I had the opportunity to deliver the keynote address, and Charese was graduating from that program. Charese was on this show a few weeks ago, so I shared a little bit more about that program there. So after this episode, definitely check out that conversation. We talked about a lot of interesting things. She shared on her expertise about 8 dimensions of wellness. So definitely check that out. But for today, she's back to the show to share a bit about her personal self-care journey. So before we get started, though, a little bit more about Charese. Charese is a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of CJ Counseling and Consulting Services, where her mission is to reimagine corporate dynamics by enhancing emotional intelligence and fostering authentic relationships, from the C-suite to frontline supervisors. She is the author of Two Witty Girls, a book that explores leadership lessons from a child's view. She has been featured on media outlets including The Today Show, Essence, Cosmopolitan, The Washington Post, Shape, and NPR. So welcome back to the show, Charese.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm excited today to dive into a bit of your own personal self-care journey. So can you tell us a little bit about a time in your life where self-care became no longer an option, but an absolute priority for you? And more importantly, what did that journey look like for you?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I was very naive in my mid-30s. I had my first child, and I just knew that I was either going to have a boy or a girl or 2 boys. I just knew that God and I had a relationship, and that's what's going to happen. So my first child was a daughter, was a girl, and I said, okay, all right, wasn't expecting this, but okay. And when I had my second daughter, the nurse said, hey, y'all are having another girl. And the room was so quiet. My husband and I was very quiet. The nurse wasn't sure if she should speak or not. And it wasn't that I had a gender preference, it's that I had an emotional preference. Because I had no idea what a healthy mother-daughter relationship looked like. I have an older brother, so I don't know what a sister relationship would look like. And I remember in that moment thinking, oh, it's up to me now to, one, nurture a mother-daughter relationship individually, as I'm also nurturing a sister relationship. And I said, and this is going to pull on me emotionally in terms of, quote unquote, getting it right. Because when you raise children, you don't know if you did it right till they get in their mid-20s, right? You don't know if you did a good job. So I'm like, okay, how do I stay present in this moment without putting too much pressure on myself, on my babies who just got here, And so I knew that I had a lot more to learn about myself, even though I was in my mid-30s, although I accomplished and did well career-wise. And I thought I knew a lot, but I realized, no, you're actually starting over at a whole other piece of your life that you have no idea what you're doing. And I also had to be okay with that part too.
Yeah.
I wasn't used to not knowing what
There
I'm
is
doing.
so much that you just shared that I think so many people could resonate with. At least, I know I can as well. And those, goodness, I mean, so I'm just going to sort of draw out on some of those. And then I want to hear a little bit more of your journey then, from kind of how you went from there to really opening yourself up to learning more and what you learned through that journey and are continuing to as well. And so, but one of those things is just these expectations that we put on ourselves. And it's like, we don't even know necessarily sometimes. I think I mentioned this a little bit on the last episode that you and I did together. but we don't even always know sometimes where those expectations come from that
Yes.
we, think, and some of it may just be kind of like it's just all we know because like
Mm-hmm.
as you shared, like you didn't have a sister relationship growing up, right? You had a
Right.
sister brother relationship and things like that, and so sometimes it's just what we know and what we grew up with, and so we just
Yes.
expect that, okay, that's exactly what my own journey is going to look like. And so it's so interesting, because life is constantly showing up in ways different than our plans and
Yes.
expectations
Mm-hmm.
continually. And I truly believe, though, that happens because there are specific things that we're, as individually within our own personal journeys are meant to learn and grow in these particular ways. And so where did this journey then take you from there?
The more I try to control things, and what I mean by that, I'm thinking, of course, I see women breastfeeding. I can do this. No, I cannot. No, I tried. It didn't work. Right. So I think that was my first thing of you can't control everything because everything is not within your control.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was single, I can clean the whole house in a day. Why can't I not clean the whole house in a day with babies? Of course I can. Well, no, you cannot clean the whole house in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got down to if I wiped off the counter, I celebrated myself. And I broke that down between the house. Okay, clean the floor, the top level, the bottom level. Nope, couldn't do that either. We'll pick a room. Sometimes I did okay, sometimes I didn't. And after a while, I'm like, listen, I wiped off the counter. I did good today. And so it took me to, no, you can't do everything. And even if you can, is this a good use of your time and energy? So, during nap time, that's when I think I really started to build a relationship and understanding of time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, how do I want to use this time during a 2-hour nap? Do I want to conquer the world while I sleep for 2 hours? Do I want to rest? Right? And this is when I had to start the process of starting to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was more freeing for me,
Mm-hmm.
and more in hindsight, of course, not in the moment. I didn't feel that way. But I started to learn you can't control everything and nothing bad is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to start giving myself grace.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know that grace was a word before that for me, or gratitude. I don't know that was even in my vocabulary for myself. And I'm like, that's okay. And there's moments where I have to stop and literally breathe. And as I'm breathing, I would say, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Right. And I may or not be, I don't know. We'll find out, we'll find out in some time how things are going. But that self-care to me in terms of releasing control is very powerful because it's very new.
Mm-hmm.
And it still evolves,
Mm-hmm.
as my children get older, of course I get older and life expands. Looking at things differently is still an evolution that I have to be okay with. You're going to get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten a lot more comfortable with saying I don't know, which is very challenging in the past. Right?
Oh, I hear you. Yeah. I'm the
like,
same way.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out together.
Yeah.
Or some things I'm like, I don't even want to figure it out. Here are your options, right, of getting this taken care of. And that's becoming freeing. Right. And I think maybe inadvertently is some lessons in there as we go along. But I think the self-care is I have to reduce the pressure that I'm putting on myself. It's not even that I want to, or that is a good thing to do. It's that I have to if I want to get the results that I want, which is I want to have a good quality of life. I want my family to have a good quality of life as a whole, and my children to have a good quality of life. And if I do that, I have to understand what is your own quality of life, right? And are you nurturing your own quality of life? So that's just kind of the journey that I have been on and still continue.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. There's so much in there. Again, that I'm sure so many of our listeners are resonating with, that I've resonated with, that really made me think about a number of things to reflect on. So I was jotting down some notes. Let's see if I can remember sort of all my thoughts with it, because there was just so many great points that I want to draw out there. I mean, first going back even just to sort of the beginning with how you mentioned with breastfeeding, it's something that I think I don't have children of my own. I practiced as a pediatrician for 16 years though. And so it's something that a lot of women feel like it's just going to happen naturally, right? And then when it doesn't, they can be really hard. I've seen this so much in my clinical practice, be really hard on themselves about that. And the fact is it doesn't, there's all sorts of issues that can come up with that. And so it doesn't always come that easily. And one thing that I always said to my new moms and families, when I saw if it was getting to the point where it was affecting their bonding with their baby, with their newborn baby, it's like, I would rather you be as less stressed. I can't say no stress at all, because a new parent, you're not sleeping very well, so I can't say no stress at all, but like as less stressed, right? As possible. And if this is interfering and impacting that bonding, again, it's looking at that sort of quality of life and what's important to you, that bonding, and that's important too. And so there's like it's sort of weighing all of those different dimensions, right? And of course, if someone's listening to this right now with a newborn at home, certainly have these conversations with your pediatrician as well, because there's, obviously so many different factors at play for each baby, nutritional factors and caloric density, like all those things. So definitely talk to your pediatrician. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there, because I think that's another one of those sort of expectations that particularly as women, so many of us place on ourselves, that like, okay, this is something that's just going to naturally happen. And for many women, it doesn't. And that's okay, And so it's kind of weighing all of those different aspects of what you want your relationship with your baby to look like, what you want your quality of life to look like, what you want your child's quality of life to look, all of that, right? And similar to something that we mentioned in the previous episode, kind of defining what that looks like for you. So I did want to mention that. And then also, as you were sharing a little bit more about your journey, something else that really stuck out to me was when you shared that, okay, I could clean the whole house in a single day when I was single, and can't do that now when, raising a family. And so, because one thing that I always say, and another place where I see that both with myself as well as my clients, we can be hard on ourselves, is when we have those same expectations on ourselves to be able to do things in the same way, the same manner, the same efficiency or productivity when we are in a completely different season of our life, right? And still having those same expectations, but knowing that those expectations for ourselves, like you said, giving ourselves grace and self-compassion, and recognizing where we are, the current situation, the current factors at play here, and giving yourself some grace and knowing that things are going to shift and change. And before we go on, I'm excited to share something that could really make a positive impact on your life. Need a way to improve focus and reduce stress? Inner Radiance Through Meditation is a self-paced audio program that guides you through the what, why, and how of meditation. With 3 audio lessons, including guided meditations, you'll learn how to overcome common obstacles, understand the science of meditation, and start a home practice that fits your life. Ready to find peace amidst the chaos? Head over to radiantlivinginstitute.com to access this course and start your journey to inner calm today. I hope you found that helpful. If you're ready to explore this more, check out the link in the show notes below. Now, let's jump back into today's episode. And then I also liked that through that process, sort of a way that I'm pulling out kind of a couple of steps for our listeners, a way that you started to address that. And I'm sure there was multiple ways, but from the portion of the journey that you shared with us, one was chunking it down.
Yes.
Of like, okay, I can't clean the whole house in a single day right now, but I can wipe down the counter or I can vacuum this room, And so chunking it down and then celebrating those steps along the way. So that's a really powerful practice. And then this process that you talked about of self-inquiry and letting go and the freedom in that. And I know, as you mentioned, you're like the letting go, like in the moment, it doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
feel like freedom. Like, and just as you were saying that, it was so funny because in my mind, as you were saying that, I was just thinking, like, yeah, in the moment, letting go feels like you're just like holding on for dear
Right.
life, like,
Yes.
and like you're like in a panic of like, I can't let go of this thing. But when you do, there's so much freedom,
Yes.
and I've been experiencing that as well in my own life in different ways, professionally and personally. And just finding so much freedom in that. It's
Yes.
hard to even explain that in any other way. But just when you start to experience that, and so many of us, it sounds like you and myself included, and many of the clients that I work with, we like to have a plan. We like to feel like we're in control of things. But the fact is, there's so much that we're not, that we don't have control over. And life has a beautiful way of showing us that, whether we want to see it or not. And I also like the practice that you shared of, because the practice that you shared of breathing and affirmations takes you back to something that you do have control over,
Yes.
and something that you do have agency over is noticing something like your breath and really connecting with that, and connecting that with some affirmations of reminding yourself who you are, whether in that moment you really believe it or not, because we all have those moments. But it's, again, it's connecting yourself to, in a world where we have so little control of anything, it's connecting you to a place that you do have control over, which is yourself, your thoughts. Yeah.
And that is a good place to start, and for us to remind ourselves is, what do I have control over? And especially when we're thinking like we have a loss of control, and we put it back on ourselves of what do we do have control over, is actually very empowering. And I always tell people, and I tell myself this, at least every 10 years, we have an opportunity to change and pivot. And we typically know when that's happening. We just feel uneasy. The same routines just doesn't work for us anymore. Maybe our sleep is off. These other signs, and sometimes there's these clear milestones that are happening in our lives that we're like, gosh, this is really challenging me in one way or another. And this is when we get opportunities to learn the most about ourselves. And as scary as it is, and as unknown and uncertain as it is, it's so important to kind of stay in that quote unquote fight, right? Because it's a fight for ourselves to understand who we are for the next level, our next journey. And so, of course, having kids is a pivotal moment, right, of learning about ourselves and those types of things. And one of the things I needed to do was make sure I didn't lose who I was in the process of being completely fearful of raising two girls, right? I was like, okay, I have to understand, what is this fear? What are you actually fearful about? And those are also questions we can ask ourselves. What am I scared of? What am I scared about? What actually is the worst that can happen? So even when I would go back to the cleaning, but before I was single, kitchen was clean before I went to bed, all the dishes were put away, everything was nice, and I'm like, I'm tired, I don't feel like it. And I remember standing in the kitchen thinking, if I don't do the dishes tonight, what is the likelihood that I will wake up and there would be insects all over the kitchen? 0, I'm going to bed, right? And so it never happened. Or I'll get up the next morning, I have energy, and then I'll do it the next morning. But just challenging those thoughts and realizing, what am I actually afraid of? And what's the worst that can happen if you don't do this one thing? Probably nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a powerful practice to
Yes.
think of that. And I've guided some of my clients on a journey like that as well, of just kind of like, okay, what is, like, literally, at a whiteboard, like, writing out what is the fear, and then like, okay, and then is that fear true? Like, is that something that could really happen? And then also, is there another perspective on this too? Like, is there actually something, this is a fear, but actually, is there something positive that could come out of this? And so that's a very powerful practice. So I want to now ask you about something else, which is, you have authored a book called Two Witty Girls. You are the mom of two young girls. You shared how this journey started, and sort of all of the whirlwind of emotions that you were feeling, and kind of questions that you had for yourself at that time. And now you have authored a book called Two Witty Girls. I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about that, and where the idea for that book came from and what it's about.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the ways I tried to stay present and get myself out of the perfectionist mode and not take things too seriously is that when my daughters would say and do funny things as they were growing up, I would post them on Facebook. And it was just a way for me to be present. And then people was enjoying, that's the post, and people would say, you should write a book. You should put this in a book. And I'm like, no, it's just fun. It's just funny things. And then when COVID came around and, I was posting things and then I was getting comments like, this is really helping me through this time. This is really funny. And I'm like, oh, and then I got into a why not season of my life. People are like, write a book. And I was thinking, why not write a book? And I couldn't come up with the answer of why not. I said, okay, well, let's put it in the book. And so it became a family book of my husband and my daughters. I just put their quotes in there. It had some illustrations in there. So it's for kids. Kids love the illustrations. They like the print. And then for adults, they like just the funny humor of themselves, childlike, or their own children or grandchildren. And so then it also became a different way for my family, but my daughters and I also, because we would go and sell the book at vendor fairs. And they would do the selling and they would do the orders and the transactions and, and I'm like, they're like, okay, we're learning some work ethic. I was like, yes, at 9 and 10, you're learning some work ethic and selling your book. And then they, they would get the little portion of money from their book sales. And so.
Raising little female entrepreneurs. I love it.
I think that's it was an interesting mesh of being present. That's where it started, right? It was just being present. And then it became connection. And then it became probably what it was when I found out I was having girls of this, I want to do a good job. I want to do a good job. It's like, oh, now we're here and they're learning different things. And they're learning to communicate, and speak up and, all these things. I'm like, in this weird way, it did come back to what I initially wanted or feared that I wouldn't do well. But once I focused on the self-care part, I got there, but with so much less pressure than where I initially started.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I love so many different aspects of that. One of them that I'm going to pull out is just this idea of like, we were talking about like how there's so much that we don't have control over. And so often we think about that in terms of the things that go the ways that we didn't want them to. Right? Of course, in hindsight, like you said, everything always works out. Yes. I mean, in hindsight, everything always works out. But in the moment, it can feel like, oh my goodness. But then there's these wonderful things that like we didn't necessarily plan for but that happen that are just so amazing. And we realize like how we needed it on so many different levels. And, that sort of why not
right
part of your journey with the book to me is like one of those, right? Of like, okay, it just, you didn't start sharing those posts with the intention of it turning into a book. You were just sharing the posts as a way to be present. And then one thing led to another thing, and now all of a sudden your kids through this experience are learning about work ethic and how to be little entrepreneurs. And you're connecting with them on different levels, and it's just amazing and just such a great story and inspiration to just if there's a little seed of interest in something, just hey, why not? Right. And see where it takes you. So this has been so amazing. And again, I feel like we could just keep chatting. There's so much more to share, but for time's sake, just going to start wrapping up and winding down this episode. So for anyone who wants to learn more about you, the wonderful work that you're doing, your book, Two Witty Girls, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn or my website, ChareseJosie.com. Two Witty Girls, twowittygirls.com. You can see a great video of the daughters promoting their book on the twowittygirls.com website.
That's great. And I will include all of those links in the show notes below. Thanks again for being here today.
Thank you.
I know you have so many choices for how to spend your time, so I thank you for being here today with Essential Self-Care. As a gift, download your free workbook, 6 simple yet powerful steps to create your radiant life at radiantlivinginstitute.com and start your journey to a more radiant you.